So before I start sharing about myself, I think it's important to always start in that good way. So what I've done here is I'm going to start with a smudge because that medicine allows us to bring our minds together as one, as well as brings the spirits in to be able to know that we're going to be asking for their guidance and direction, as well as respecting the knowledge that they've shared over the generations, right, that we still speak of today. So with that, I'm going to have that smudge burning to bring in those good medicines and those spirits. And to introduce myself, I'm not fluent in the language. I'm still learning the language. It's even more that I've taken up, working from home to be able to do that. So the language, I'm going to do the best I can to introduce myself in the language that I understand at this time. Winnabojo, Mashomasok, Nokomasok, Gejemenado, we Nokomis, Megazens, Wedan and Mizwasha Asamasok. Nadishkaze, Mayanodinish, Nabikwe, and Dal, Malin Seat, and Delhi, Nadonjiba, and Niagara Andaya. So I just wanted to welcome the grandfathers and the grandmothers in spirit in a good way, as well as the creator, and just introducing myself, the names that have been given to me. And that's important, I think, with anything when we begin talking about ourselves. It's a way that the spirits know that something's going to be happening. And they are the teachers. They are the Ashkabeases. They are the helpers. I'm a helper too. But they're the ones that are sharing that knowledge. And I'm ever thankful for them, because some of those ancestors, those grandfathers and the grandmothers have passed on. Some of my teachers have passed on. They've transitioned. So again, it's respecting their knowledge. It's respecting, their teachings and honoring them in that good way. And I continue to do that. I'm very dedicated to doing that, because I know that they took that time to help me, to teach me, and they still continue to teach from that spirit side. And so I just want to respect them in those ways too. I'm known as Cindilee is my English name. The names that were given to me is Grandmother Little Eagle, which is my spirit name. My medicine name that was given to me many, many years ago was Daughter of Seven Grandfathers. And I think that probably before that's when my journey started about who I am. I wasn't raised in the culture. I wasn't raised in the tradition. As a very young girl, I spent a lot of time outside, not in the house. You would find me communing with nature. I was in the trees. I was 30 feet up in a tree. I still have no fear to climb into the trees, though I have fear to, stand outside and lean with the CN Tower. I don't think I would want to do that. However, I have no problem to go 100 feet up in a tree. I think it's because of the relationships with these things, and that's what I'll be talking about in my next video. After I introduce myself, is about building relationships, and I'll be talking about the drum. So with that being said, I wasn't raised, and my dad, my parents have both passed away. My mom passed away when I was 36, and my dad passed away about 4 years ago. So growing up as children, like my dad always taught me things. Like we would go out and we pick leeks, and he would show me the plants in the bush, and he was very proud about what he would say his Indian heritage. He was born 1938, so that's the word he used. He said, I'm proud that we have an Indian background. And I used to ask my dad about, what that was. And he couldn't really tell me, because he wasn't raised by his biological parents. His father wasn't ever part of his life, his biological father. His biological mother had him at 17. And at that time, in 1938, when my dad was born, there was a lot of stuff going on in the Delhi area. And there was a lot of things happening with facts and the 60s scoop and a lot of things happening in residential schools still in that matter. So she had him as a very unwed lady, and that wasn't really acceptable back then. And then it was even less acceptable that um, the father was an indigenous man, that he was Indian. So my dad was sent away into the Niagara region when he was 6 months old, and he was raised by a family here. It wasn't foster, but he stayed with them his whole life, and so he never really knew his mother. He met her a few times, but he never knew his dad. So growing up, when my dad had the opportunity to be outside in nature, as he did, because he was an outside man all the time, I was always the one that went with them. I had a younger sister; she went, but I was always wanting to learn these things, and we didn't dare talk about that kind of stuff around my mom because my mom was very adamant about, we don't talk about that. Dad has a better life. He's not where he was growing up as a child. Um, we don't talk about that. So we weren't given the opportunity to learn. So a lot of the learning that I had as a young child was um, through nature and spirit directly, and building those relationships with everything around me. I remember as I continued to go through school, I've always had long hair and always had a bit of a more of an olive darker complexion. Didn't really fit into the community in which I live in, which is in the country. So it wasn't a pleasant experience going through school at times because people would ask me questions that I couldn't answer, which was very frustrating. As well as then there was times where I didn't want people to really know those things either. So I changed the conversation and I would try to blend in and I would, go along with it. I just look this way. I do have an English and French background as well, but my spirit has always connected to being the First Nations aspect of my dad's family. So growing up, I continued to, go through school, and as I got older, people asked me more questions, and again, really didn't have an opportunity to learn a lot because it was sort of prohibited growing up as a kid. And I continued just to spend lots of time in spirit, spending a lot of time with myself, and just learning from dreams and just watching. I smile because I ask people, do you know the order of the birds when they come back in the spring? People go, what are you talking about? I said, well, there's an order of how they come back, and there's an order of how they leave. But those are all knowledge that I learned growing up, just observing and building relationship, being part of something. So as I got older, it became more acceptable to be Indigenous or have an Indigenous background. And then I was able to speak a little bit more of that. My mom passed, so I was able to even, look more into that. But prior to that time, I am a grandmother of a wonderful grandson. I do have another grandson on the way, and I have 5 adult children. They're all 2 years apart. They're amazing young people, and they're very gifted. And so growing up, I wanted to be able to share with them because the same questions came from a kid. Where are we from? Like, why do we look like this? My husband that I've been with for 29 years, he actually been with him since I was 14. So that tells you a lot about my commitments to things, and working through a lot of difficult things and understanding barriers and challenges and how to work through that. So he also has an Indigenous background. He's Mohawk on his mother's side, and he's Algonquin on his father's side, and again, a French and English background. A little bit of understanding that history there with our, where that English and French come from. So, as I grew and I got more interested in understanding about my ancestry, I found myself, connecting with Indigenous elders, traditional people. It wasn't like I went looking for them. That's the funniest thing about it. Like spirit just showed me them. I happened to be invited to circles. I happened to go to a powwow and people would start talking to me. And I truly know that it was all spirit guided. There's no other way about it. And I know that because I've had it my whole life. I understand it. I know what it looks like. I know what it feels like. I know what it feels. how to see it. And so some elders, traditional people, took up that time to teach. There's been a lot of them, and I'm not one to name them all unless I have to. And I've been told not to do that because I don't think it's something that I need to do. It's about how you walk and how you are. So they've taught me many things, and I continue to offer in a good way. And offering that some of that for the first teachings, to share as well, and the smudge and bringing our minds together. And so my journey has been one of self-employment for a number of years, over 10 years. I worked in the holistic health field. I worked in counseling, spiritual counseling, healing work, aromatherapy, reflexology, Reiki, many different healing modalities. Some of the modalities back in the 90s, I was the first one in Canada to receive them, and I ended up teaching others. And after 10 years, I stepped away from that, and Spirit guided me to go into community, in which I began working in Toronto at the Native King Center Toronto, and I worked in the culture department. And that was amazing because I was a manager there, and for 4.5 years, I got to sit with even more traditional teachers and learn and just expand my knowledge and my teaching. And they shared with me things that I was able to do and gave me rights to things that I was able to do. And I just remember those experiences, and I'm still connected to that community, looking after the sacred items that are there in the center. And then from there, Spirit led me to working in another, back home. I came back home, even though I commuted every day. I never moved to Toronto. I have my family here, so I need the environment here. And so I commuted and came back to work in the Friendship Center here, which I worked in the education and helping young people get their OSSD. And from there, I continued to work for the local school boards, doing cultural extensions, working and looking at documents and helping our young people and helping people learn. And that I still continue to traditionally dance at the powwows, traditional powwows, facilitate full moon ceremonies and ceremonies that people ask in healing. Continue to still learn with mentors. And today I work with youth. I'm an instructor, and I help teach pre-exposure program for young people, Indigenous people. And part of that is to teach about the culture. And years ago, it was said to me that there's a lot of brown faces. This wonderful woman said to me, she said, there's a lot of brown faces like you that don't know who they are or where they're from. And she says, the work you're doing is really important. So where I am today, and the medicines and the sacred helpers, the Ashkabeases, the gifts that were given to me on birth, are all from Spirit. And all these things have come through ceremony and the medicines and the relationships. That's how I know what I know. And those teachers that have taught and continue to teach me, physically here or spiritually in the other world, it's all Spirit taught. It's been passed on narratively. It's things that they've done, and they've always said that you have to do the work. You have to do it. You can't just. It's a living. You have to live it. You have to breathe it. You have to think. It is a way of life, right? Not everybody wants to do that. And I took a 7-year sabbatical because I needed time to do some personal things in my own life, and I did that. And so after a 7-year sabbatical, the Spirit woke me up and said, that's it. You've had enough time. And now you need to do this work again. And it was exactly 7 years. So I thought that was kind of interesting. So I think that's a little bit about myself. My clan is Wolf. And I have various helpers that help me. I'm wearing today the shawl for the missing and Indigenous women. It's very dear to my heart. And working with our young people, teaching them, but also guiding them to where they need to go, right? If it's not, I can only share, what I've been shared, that's been shown to me, and what I've experienced, what I've grown with. I also have a Maliseet background, that came out after my dad passed away a year later. My cousin contacted me to let me know, hey, by the way, did you know this? So again, I'm thankful and I want to learn more about that background on my dad's side as well. So here I am today, and this is who I am, and I'm hoping that that was able to share a little bit, and she may get for listening, and to my story. It's hard to share because it's a humble thing, and you don't really been told not to talk about yourself. You're not supposed to talk about these sacred things. If they're needed, then the Creator puts them in place, and the spirits direct you, and people come, and you do the work that you're supposed to do because that's why you're here. So, too much.